Yeah. Knock, knock. I don't have a gavel, so let's get started. MJ, can you call the roll for us?
Senator Searle.
Here.
Senator Mason.
Here.
Senator Ruff. Senator Lewis. Senator Peterson. Delegate Ware.
Here.
Delegate Bloxham. Delegate Campbell.
Here.
Delegate Hodges.
Here.
Delegate Wiebert. Delegate Wright.
Here.
Delegate Bulova.
Here.
Delegate Krizik. Lamont Curtis.
Here.
Brian Bayford.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have a quorum.
Cool. Thank you, MJ. Well, welcome everybody to the Water Commission. This might be the most people I've ever seen for a Water Commission meeting, so we're excited to see so many people here to talk about water. We have a pretty full agenda today. I'd like to move it quick, but one of the things we added at the last minute was consideration for an electronic meetings policy, so we could try to have a little more flexibility in terms of getting our meetings together. Amigo, you want to explain the policy that you put in front of us?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As of September of 2022, the legislature passed a new provision in 40 that will allow for individual members and bodies to meet virtually. But before you can take advantage of those provisions, the body has to pass a policy. So what you have before you is basically a policy that will allow for the full range of uses with under that new provision, with the exception of three things. First, under the general statute, if a member lives more than 60 miles away from the meeting site, then he or she will be able to participate remotely. This policy would not allow for that. It would allow for the other provisions. Second, it will not allow a member who is participating virtually to be able to make motions or to vote. In terms of the body, what this policy that's before you does is the body would not be able to have all virtual meetings. You'll be able to have meetings to receive presentations, but you will not be able to have meetings where you can vote on things. And that's the main difference from...
Great. Thanks, Amigo. And so it's my understanding this policy is consistent with the one that Delegate Ware and I adopted for the joint pandemic study, which I believe was also consistent with the current House majority's policy, right?
Yeah, and I think the Joint Healthcare Commission also uses this policy and several others.
Right. I just thought this might make it easier for us to get meetings and quorums together and stuff if we had these options available. Anybody have any questions for Amigo?
I move the adoption of the policy.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion?
Yeah.
You good? Yeah. Okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, I think under the statute it has to be a roll call vote.
Oh, okay. MJ, you want to call the roll?
Senator Searle.
Aye.
Senator Mason.
Aye.
Senator Ruff. Senator Lewis. Senator Peterson. Delegate Ware.
Aye.
Delegate Bloxham. Delegate Campbell.
Aye.
Delegate Hodges.
Here.
Delegate Hodges.
Here.
Say aye or nay.
Aye. Sorry.
Delegate Wiebert. Delegate Wright.
Aye.
Delegate Bulova.
Aye.
Delegate Krizik. Lamont Curtis. Brian Bayford. Ayes 9, no 0.
Thank you, MJ. Appreciate that unanimous vote. I think Delegate Hodges thinks he's in Congress or something.
Don't move me there.
Okay. Well, the first item on our agenda is an update from Alex Renew and potential endorsement of proposed legislation from...
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
If I may, before we get going, I believe we have some new members that... If we
Oh,
want some
yeah. Why don't everybody...
introductions,
Yeah, good idea.
If that's appropriate?
Yeah,
If
why
I
doesn't
may
everybody
ask
introduce
that?
themselves? Yeah. Okay. Why don't you start with you, Keith? You go first. Introduce yourself and come down the line.
Well, I've been on here, actually it's still my first year, but Keith Hodges, delegate for the 98th District, soon to be the 68th District.
I've been on a long time. Curtis.
And folks, make sure you hit the button on your mic so that we can get it on the live stream.
Thank you. Yes, I've been here for a long time.
Yep.
And Lamont Curtis.
Good.
Brian Bayford, my first meeting, and I've been in the water industry for over 40 years, and looking forward to helping out here.
Mr. Bayford, what do you do for a living?
Right now, I actually bury people, but I used to own a water company, and I've been in that industry and taught for the Water Quality Association and Well Drillers Associations.
Good. Welcome.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Delegate David Bulova, representing the 37th District and soon to be the 11th District, which is the City of Fairfax, George Mason University, and Oakton areas.
Good afternoon. Delegate Ellen Campbell, represent the 24th currently and soon to be the 36th District.
I'm Delegate Lee Ware. I currently represent the 65th District, soon to be the 77th, which is Powhatan, Amelia, Nottoway, and a portion of Chesterfield around Midlothian.
And I'm Scott Servell, Chairman of the Commission for the time being. Currently represent 36th District for another 20-some days, and then I moved to the 34th Senate District, which is eastern part of Fairfax County between City of Alexandria, the Potomac River, the Occoquan, and I-95.
Monty Mason. I currently represent the 1st Senate District. I will soon be exclusively at 12 Bayberry Lane, Williamsburg, Virginia, right on the other side of the Lake Matoka from the college. Please stop by and see me.
My name is Tommy Wright. I'm from Victoria, Virginia. I currently represent the 61st District in the House, and soon will be the 50th District, composed of Lunenburg, Mecklenburg, Prince Edward, Charlotte, and the northern part of Halifax. Glad to be here. Thank you.
Great. Well, so first we have on the agenda is this Alexandria CSO, Alexandria Renew problem. And you all might remember we had legislation, I think in 2017, 18, I think, requiring the city to fix its combined sewer problem within 7 years, I think. And they're here to ask us, give us a presentation of where they are and ask for an extension. Senator Eben, and I believe Sarah Taylor with the City of Alexandria are online to present the legislation. And I would ask, I guess, Senator Eben, I guess we should probably do the presentation of Alex Renew first and then go to you, or do you want to speak first, Senator Eben?
Well, maybe I can introduce it just to refresh the Commission's memory, Chairman Servell, and any who might not have been familiar about how we got here. As you said, it was 2017 when both houses passed legislation to require construction on Alexandria CSO remediation to begin by July 1st, 2023. And the legislation required that it be completed, finished by July 1st, 2025, which is considered a fairly aggressive schedule for a $615 million project. The city transferred the project to Alex Renew, also known as the Alexandria Sanitation Authority, in July 2018. And Mr. Carl, the CEO of Alexandria Renew, is in the room with you in Richmond there, along with Preston Bryant, a government relations representative. But they can tell you, answer more specific questions. But the project is a 2-mile tunnel, 150 feet below ground, to serve as a sewage conveyance and storage, with pumping stations, interceptor, wastewater plant upgrades, and it's the largest infrastructure project in Alexandria's history. And through November of this year, we've spent $388 million on it, and the project is 65% complete. But the reason that we're before you today asking you to endorse legislation that gives us a 1-year extension is that the project is about 3 months behind schedule from reasons beyond Alex Renew's control. And Mr. Carl can detail them further, but COVID-19 delayed by 1 month, the manufacturing of a tunnel boring machine that was made in Germany. And then the Russia-Ukraine war delayed by 1 month the shipping of the tunnel boring machine, which is massive, from Germany to the U.S. And then a shortage of concrete in Northern Virginia accounted for an additional 6-week delay. And we're afraid that there might be additional delays. And since it's a mandate under state law currently that we finish this by July 1st and we're 3 months behind schedule, we're respectfully asking for you to endorse legislation that would extend the statutory deadline by 1 year. And before I turn it over to the others, I think it's important to note that at least in the Senate, the major proponents of the bill were yourself and Senator Richard Stewart. And you've, my understanding is that you both endorsed this legislation to allow for a delay. And also, the Department of Environmental Quality is supportive of the legislation, and the key environmental stakeholders that were supportive of the bill, Potomac River Keepers and Chesapeake Bay Foundation, it's my understanding that they each support the bill as well. So that's the stage I wanted to set. We're asking for you all to consider endorsing a bill The major element is just one word changing the year that the project is completed. And with that, you may want to hear from others. Or we can take questions.
Thank you, Senator Evan. Members of the commission, you might have, you look in your folder, you have a copy of the bill in front of you. All it does is changes the year and makes a couple of technical changes to committee names. But you all might remember this is a very hot topic back in 2017. And the state still, I think, has two other CSOs, a little one in Lynchburg and a big one here in the city where we sit right now. Is there somebody from Alexandria new to present? I thought, there he is. Great. Welcome to the commission. You're Justin Carl?
That's correct.
Okay, good to see you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, thank you for giving us the opportunity today to present an update on the Alexandria CSO project, or what we call River Renew at Alex Renew. My name is Justin Carl. I'm the general manager at Alex Renew. We are Alexandria's wastewater provider, and we also provide wastewater services for portions of Fairfax County as well. I've been involved in this program since its inception in November 2017, supporting the previous general manager, and now supporting the job from the general manager position at Alex Renew. You'll see a picture on this starting slide. This is a completed 12-foot diameter tunnel that we've built to date. We're currently 9,000 feet of 11,500-foot tunnel in, so we have 2,000 feet remaining. I want to thank the General Assembly for their ongoing support of this historic initiative in Alexandria. What we're showing on this slide is how we funded the project. State grants combined with low-interest loans from EPA and the Virginia Clean Water Revolving Loan Fund have significantly reduced the bill impact to our residents in Alexandria. On the right-hand side of the slide, you'll see our initial projection for bill increases were between $20 and $40 per month in April 2018 when we finished the initial plan, and our current projection is about $17 a month of an increase on the bill. Still a lot of money, but certainly decreased due to those state grants and also our low-interest loans. Another good story about the program that we wanted to share today is on these large mega projects, typically you don't see local spending. They're foreign firms come in and do the work. We have the unique opportunity to have our prime contractor based in Alexandria, Virginia, and to date, out of the $388 million spent, we spent over half of that in Virginia, Northern Virginia, Alexandria, and the entire state. The rest of that comes from portions of Maryland and D.C., and then a small non-local portion. And when you think about a tunnel boring machine of $25 million, a non-local portion, relatively small portion of the entire pie. Just a quick overview of how we got to where we are today. Alex Renew got involved in this program in June 2018 when we coordinated and partnered with the city of Alexandria to develop a joint long-term control plan. That long-term control plan put forth a unified tunnel system, which I'll get into today. And because it impacted Alex Renew's plant, it made sense for one entity to own the implementation of the program. So in July 2018, the program was transferred to Alex Renew for our responsibility to implement. And we started construction a year later at the plant. And about a year and a half later, we started construction on the biggest portion of our project, the tunnel. So the Alexandria CSO project is really 4 projects in one. Initially, to pave the way for the tunnel, we had about $35 million of wastewater plant upgrades. We had to relocate our laboratory, locker room, personnel spaces to make way for the tunnel. That's what we call the building demolition and upgrade project. We upgraded our pumping station to accept more flow at the front end of our plant. And in addition, to prepare for 140 trucks per day of construction traffic during tunnel construction, we also upgraded our security gates and access to the facility. On the right, you see the project that's currently under construction. The 3 wastewater projects were completed in 2021. We're currently building what's shown on the right-hand side of the page, and this is just a zoom in of Old Town Alexandria. Alex Renew is in the bottom left-hand portion of the page. Off to the right, that dark blue line is a 12-foot diameter, 150-foot deep tunnel constructing using a tunnel boring machine. I've also noted on the slide where the tunnel boring machine is currently located, just about in line with Prince Street. We're about 9,000 feet in. On the left-hand side of the page is the purple line. That's a 6-foot diameter interceptor. Those two sewers unite at Alex Renew in a 150-foot deep pumping station to pump flows back to the headworks of the plant. You also note where the outfalls are located. This project is picking up 4 combined sewer outfalls. When the project is complete, it all flow by gravity to Alex Renew, where it will be pumped out and treated. These are the major components that are currently under construction. I talked on the left about our tunnel boring machine named Hazel. It's an earth pressure balanced tunnel boring machine shipped from Schwanau, Germany in 2022. In the middle of the page, we're building these diversion facilities. These act like hydraulic elevators to take flow from the existing combined sewer, drop them 150 feet deep into the tunnel where they can flow by gravity to the wastewater plant. We also have to complete a 12-story underground pumping station, which is shown on the third block. That is a 20 MGD pumping station and a 180 million gallon per day pumping station housed in a 65-foot diameter shaft and 35-foot diameter shaft. When that's complete, we'll put a 4-story superstructure on top of that to support operations of the tunnel. And then on the right-hand side of the page, it's probably the most challenging part of our job, is a 6-foot diameter open cut interceptor that runs up the west side of our program. This is what the current schedule looks like. As I mentioned, wastewater projects were completed in 2021. We're currently building. In order to make the schedule happen, we had to stack activities. So we're building the pumping station, waterfront tunnel, and those diversion facilities, as well as the interceptor I mentioned, all at the same time. We needed to stack those activities to have a chance of meeting the July 1st, 2025 date. You can see the purple line, the longest critical path, the longest lead time of construction goes through Alex Renew and our pumping station, and that's where we're currently seeing a delay due to the delay of our tunnel boring machine. Currently, we're about a 90-day delay, and I'll talk more about that in a few slides. Some really nice photos to show progress. The program overall is 65% complete. Each of the sites shown here are one of the outfall sites. On the left, it's a view of the Potomac River and a 150-foot deep shaft that will take flows from outfall 1 and bring it into the tunnel for treatment. The picture we showed on the cover slide is the waterfront tunnel. We're 9,000 feet in. We've excavated 95,000 tons of soil, and each one of those rings are 4.5 feet wide. We've put 2,000 of those rings in to make up that tunnel. And then on the right, you can see the outfall 2 shaft, again, that hydraulic elevator. Our pumping station liner is nearly complete on the bottom left. Our diversion chamber for outfalls 3 and 4 in the bottom center, and then the 6-foot diameter pipe being installed on the bottom right. In addition to the significant progress we've made to date, we've also had overwhelming community support in the project, and we found new ways to give back to the community to bring them along and educate them about the work. These are just some pictures highlighting some of the work we've done. On the top right, we've brought over 150 community members down into the tunnel to show them what this investment is doing for them and their city. The delays experienced to date, so when we talk about the delay, it's important to note that our substantial completion date for this project was July 1st, 2025, which was the mandate set by the April 2017 law enacted by the General Assembly. So any delay to that substantial completion date was going to put us in conflict with the date, the statutory mandate. So we had 3 major delays, which were previously explained. When we were manufacturing our tunnel boring machine in Germany, it was during the height of COVID. We had a COVID-19 outbreak at the factory. The factory had to be evacuated, and it led to a 4-week delay on the job. Another issue with the tunnel boring machine is due to the war in Ukraine. When we went to ship the TBM by ship from Europe to the United States, we encountered another 4-week delay. And then in January of 2022, we had a concrete shortage in Northern Virginia that prevented us from putting the shafts, those concrete shafts in that we showed pictures of on the previous slide, at the schedule we wanted to. We've worked with the contractor to make up as much time as possible, but it is putting us in conflict with the statutory deadline. So as mentioned earlier, we appreciate the support of Senator Eben and Delegate Bulova for introducing this legislation, and also appreciate the stakeholder support from DEQ, the Riverkeeper, as well as Chesapeake Bay Foundation in supporting this legislation. I'll also note we also passed around a 8.5 by 11 to the commission. We've not only been impacted from a schedule standpoint, but during our project, we bid our project in December 2020. We've also experienced unprecedented inflation on the project to the tune to date of about $20 million in additional expenditures to support the construction of this initiative. With that, we'll open it up for questions, if there are any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Carl. I had a couple of questions really quick. What do you do with all that dirt, the 95 tons of dirt? Where does it go?
The dirt gets loaded into a dump truck and hauled to a landfill for daily cover. It's going into a landfill in Maryland.
Maryland for just cover?
Just daily cover, correct.
Got it. Second question. What is the average bill impact on that, on the average? I know the state has given you all some significant grants, the feds too. What is the bill impact going to be on ratepayers for this? Do you have any idea?
Annually, it's about the Alexandria CSO impact on the bill annually is about $350 or about $17 a month for the average user of 4,000 gallons per month.
Got it. Good number. Those are my future constituents. Just wanted to know that. All right. Well, thank you for the presentation. I know the original concern when the legislation came through was whether was sort of the city's diligence in moving this along. You all have been moving mountains and making this thing move quickly and getting all your permits in place, especially during a pandemic, et cetera. It looks like you're making good progress. Does anybody on the commission have any questions? Delegate Vice Chair Ware.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of things. It's a staggering, to this non-engineer looking at it, it's an amazing structure project. As Senator Eben described it, he made it sound as if we were talking in weeks in terms of how much the delay has been so far. We're talking about tacking on an extra year. What degree of confidence do you have that you will complete this work within that statutory if we were to extend?
So thank you. We're currently 90 days behind schedule. We are seeking an additional year to account for some additional delays. We have to build that pumping station. That's still a 12-story deep pumping station. I think our concern right now, and the reason we're asking for additional time beyond 90 days or 6 months, is because we do expect to experience some additional delays in procuring that equipment. A lot of that equipment is also coming from overseas, but we feel we're confident we'll complete it within that year, but we're asking for that additional time because we do expect some delays with long lead times associated with that equipment.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions? Delegate Hodges.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the original legislation, but not meeting that statutory deadline, were there any penalties in that legislation? I didn't think there were. It just had a date. It just said you had to do it by a certain deadline.
Yeah, you missed Delegate Hodges. The Senator Stewart's original bill had some consequences in it, I seem to think, but the bill that ended up passing, I don't think has any consequence. They could be obviously sued and somebody get an injunction or something like that, I guess. As a lawyer, that's what I would say, but I don't see any other consequences. Mr. Carl, you have a thought about that, or?
We do. The legislation date got put into our Alex Renew's wastewater permit. So if we do not comply with that date in our permit, we could face damages from not meeting the date in our permit. It would allow DEQ to extend the permit date as well.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Delegate Bolova.
Yeah, and I guess to that point, it is very significant that this is baked into the permit because those permit violations can be very, very high. I don't know if they're the same as the stormwater permits, but I think it's $32,560 per incident per day. So it's definitely a pretty strong stick that the state has if they chose to do that. And so I think in this case, I don't know that DEQ would want to wield that stick. But this just makes sure that we recognize that Alexandria has really done just a yeoman's job of taking a huge project that I honestly, back in 2017, didn't think they would possibly be able to do, and they've come really close. And so I think we just want to make sure they're not put at risk of those kind of violations.
Any other questions from the commission? Oh, okay. Anybody have a motion to endorse this concept for the bill? Yes.
So move.
There's a second.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion about that? Senator Eben, you want to say anything else?
Thank you.
Wait a minute. Wait.
Thanks to members of the commission. I think it's pretty clear, but I appreciate your consideration.
Okay. Okay. All those in favor? Can we do this by voice, amigo? Yeah. Okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Great. All right. You're endorsed. So hopefully that'll help you in session.
Thank you.
Great. So next on the agenda, we have an update on the SWIFT project. And I put on here approval of proposed budget action, which I actually didn't write, but maybe we can verbalize. But you all remember the SWIFT project is the project by which we pump treated groundwater in Virginia Beach area back down into the Potomac Aquifer to try to recharge the aquifer, otherwise known as the Eastern Groundwater Management Area. And presenting to us, are you Jay Burness?
Yes, I am.
Great. Okay, Mr. Burness, why don't you give us a presentation on this? What was, I guess, formerly a pilot project, and now we're talking about maybe not being a pilot anymore. So,
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, good afternoon. Really happy to be here. Glad to share with you an update on our SWIFT program. Really quick, just about us. We're created in 1940, and since that time, now we've served 20 cities and counties in Eastern Virginia. Unlike our friends to the north, we do have a separate sanitary sewer system. So in our area, there are two key regulatory pressures. The Chesapeake Bay TMDL and what we're looking at now in 2026, the Phase 3 WIP, and the groundwater supply in the Potomac Aquifer. And what I'm here today is to talk about SWIFT. And a really quick overview of it is we're taking our highly treated effluent that we were sending out into the Chesapeake Bay, and there are no beneficial users for this highly treated effluent. We're adding advanced water treatment to our existing wastewater treatment plants, taking that to drinking water quality, purifying that water, and pumping that into the Potomac Aquifer. And by doing so, you're going to create a sustainable water supply. But more importantly, and the largest driver for this project, is a significant reduction of nutrients and the restoration of the Chesapeake Bay. And so if you think about the Phase 3 WIP, all of our HRSD SWIFT upgrades are essential for the Commonwealth to meet that 2026 deadline. All of our SWIFT projects are encapsulated into the 2021 ENRCP legislation. What I'm here today is to talk about an update of how HRSD is aggressively ensuring that we're executing these projects so that we can meet these tight deadlines. And this graph really shows the significant reduction in nutrients that these projects provide. If you look at the graph on the left, if you compare the nutrients for total nitrogen from 2021 to 2028, an over 70% reduction in total nitrogen. And for total phosphorus, over 50% reduction in total phosphorus. And so if you think back to Phase 1 WIP, 2010, HRSD in the lower James River, we were discharging 6 to 7 million pounds of total nitrogen during that time frame. So if you look at 2028, the values are missing, I apologize. It's down to 772,000, almost a 90% reduction since Phase 1 WIP. Similarly with total phosphorus, comparing 2010 total phosphorus loads of about 600,000 pounds total phosphorus to what we're projecting in 2028, about 115,000 pounds, an 80% reduction. So very significant, which is why these are such important projects to meet the Phase 3 WIP. These are the list of projects and project costs. So in black are the active SWIFT-related projects. In gray is the ENRCP project that's already completed. Looking at total project costs, you're looking at $2.2 billion. And the important part is that lower right-hand corner. That's $1.3 billion in WQIF eligible costs. But that is specifically for nutrients. The beauty of SWIFT is that it has other benefits, which I want to touch on. The first is it provides a sustainable water supply. Looking at the graph on the left, you can see dark red's bad, blue is good. You can see the cone of depressions where those paper mills are. On the right, it shows what it looks like when HRSD's SWIFT program is recharging the aquifer. And what we found through modeling is that we will reduce 77% of the critical cells. And critical cells are how DEQ is managing groundwater permits for the Potomac Aquifer. And by recharging the aquifer, we're going to reverse decades of declines. Yes?
is that big white spot on there where the meteor hit?
Yes, correct.
Got it, okay.
The Chesapeake Bay impact crater, yes. Another great bonus for the SWIFT program is there's a climate change piece for sea level rise. And so NOAA predicts that 1/3 of sea level rise in Hampton Roads is due to land subsidence. So what's happening in Hampton Roads, as the water levels decline, those clay layers start to compact. And what's happening is Hampton Roads is sinking. while sea levels are rising. And so one of the reasons I put Norfolk, a picture of Norfolk on there is their city council just approved $2.6 billion in flood mitigation projects and received a $400 million federal grant. And that's just for the city of Norfolk. Just think about the other 14 Hampton Roads localities that are going to be impacted by sea level rise and looking at flood mitigation. And another bonus is saltwater intrusion. So as you can see, this is a cross-section of the Potomac Aquifer. Blue is freshwater, red is saltwater. Because our aquifer does not get naturally recharged, you can imagine this pressure gradient. As you're pulling water out of the aquifer, you're pulling that salt water in. And so what happens is if you, once you have saltwater intrusion into the aquifer, it's potentially irreversible. In Eastern Virginia, we estimate about 20% of the households rely on groundwater as their primary source of drinking water. And if you think about why California has been doing groundwater replenishment, Orange County specifically, since the 1970s, their main reason is for protection of their aquifer to prevent saltwater intrusion. In this case with SWIFT, it's just one of many benefits. Now I'm going to switch gears if there's no questions about that and give you some project updates on the specific projects that make up SWIFT. So this is our James River plant. This will be the first full-scale facility. It's located in Newport News along the James River. Total project cost of $580 million. WQAF grant amount eligible estimated at $345 million. Significant reduction in nutrients. It's currently under construction. We're looking to finish this project in 2026. Quick construction shot. This is a recent shot. If you look at that tower crane in the middle, that is our process building number 1. This is where the first half of our SWIFT facility will be located. The second part is in that building to the left, where the biofiltration, GAC, and UV disinfection will be located. So one of the reasons why this is such an expensive project is not only is it a lot of construction, but you have to maintain plant operations. This plant treats about 15 million gallons a day, and that has to go on as we're building this construction. Second project is our boat harbor diversion to Nansemond. So our boat harbor treatment plant, it's located at the south end of Newport News before you're going, get into the Monitor Merrimack Bridge Tunnel. So what we've determined is that treatment plant was on such a small site, impacted by sea level rise, there's no room to add advanced nutrient reduction at this site. So what we made a business decision to convert that to a treatment plant, build a 5-mile pipeline across the James River, expand our Nansemond treatment plant to the south, which is in Suffolk, Virginia, and then divert the flow. So this project is $500 million, grant amounts $289 million. So a significant nutrient reduction, 620,000 pounds a year of total nitrogen. And this is a great example of why conveyance is important to be funded for WQIF. So this is the one project where we are a little bit worried about meeting our deadline because there are 4 packages of projects that have to occur at the same time. My understanding is this force main across the James River may be a world record, and we are having issues with getting easements in Suffolk. So this is the one we're a little bit worried about. So this is the pump station. This is no ordinary pump station that you might see in your neighborhood. It's actually 2 large pump stations, incorporates storage, but also a portion of preliminary treatment with the grit removal. And this is for the 5-mile pipeline that's going to go through the James River. 1 mile of it will be directionally drilled. This is the platform for the drill machine. That is a football field. That's 100 yards of a platform where the drill machine will be located. On the right side is the landing side on the Newport News side where the pipe will come up. The remaining 4 miles will be marine trenched that will tie into the Suffolk side. Now all of this flow will go to our Nansemond treatment plant. This will be our second full-scale SWIFT facility. Project cost on this is almost $1 billion. Total significant nutrient reduction. This is being done in 2 phases. So this is in design/construction. First phase is expected to be done in 25. That's all the main nutrient removal parts. 2028 is when all the wells and all the SWIFT will be done, and we'll be replenishing the aquifer in 2028. This is what this construction looks like on the Nansemond plant. You can see the folks building the pump station on the left side, very large pump station. On the right side is the main electrical building. So in summary, again, SWIFT provides a number of great benefits. It's a very unique project in the country, one of the largest water reuse projects in the country. On the schedule, James River and Boat Harbor expected to be completed in 26. Nansman done in 28. We have $1.3 billion in WQIF eligible cost. And again, all of these projects are essential for the Commonwealth to meet our Phase 3 WIP requirements. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions. And if y'all haven't seen or visited our SWIFT Research Center, I would encourage you to come by. We would love to have you. Governor came a year ago. We had Congresswoman Kiggins. We love to give folks tours to show you how we're taking this wastewater to drinking water quality and pumping it into our aquifer. We've been doing this since 2018.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Burness. It's very interesting stuff. I have a couple questions for you real quick. So, first of all, I'm trying to understand how we got here. So the first project was just a pilot. Pilot went really well, and now you've expanded it, right?
Yes.
Got it. Second question I had. So you're talking about nitrogen reduction. Are you saying that prior to this, you all didn't treat the water quite to this extent so that there was nitrogen going to the water, but to put it into the ground, you have to further treat it to clean it out, and that's why there's a nitrogen reduction?
Sort of. So in 2021 was Phase 2 WIP, 2026 is Phase 3 WIP. And to meet those requirements, HRSD has what's called a bubble permit. And so we have a number of wastewater plants that discharge into the James River, and so we are required to be below our waste load allocation. And so through a mix of adding advanced nutrient reduction at these plants and with SWIFT, because now it's not going into the Chesapeake Bay, it's actually going into the aquifer, is how we achieve this significant amount of nutrient reduction.
Okay, and then my last question is, you listed on here a whole bunch of grants that are funding these next projects. Are these water quality improvement fund grants, or were you talking about other types of grants like money under like the Infrastructure Act or anything like that? Is any of this stuff eligible under the Infrastructure Act?
So two things. We did receive about a little over $30 million from the ARPA funds through DEQ. I think they had $100 million eligible for the James River and Nansman projects. In total, we got about a little over $30 million. But because of the type of entity we are, we didn't qualify for the same grants that maybe a city would qualify for. So the only way we could get like an ARPA grant would be through DEQ. So the only other grants that we do have that were slated to get are WQIF grants. Everything else is funded either through the Clean Water Program. We also have WIFIA grants, WIFIA Clean Water loans and WIFIA loans through EPA.
Nothing under the Infrastructure Act, the Federal Infrastructure Act?
Again, because because of the type of entity we are, we didn't qualify like a city would qualify.
Great, okay. Anybody else in the commission have any questions? Delegate Hodges.
Mr. Chairman, I tried to use the fancy technology, but we'll do it the old-fashioned way. Thank you for being with us. I'm a fan. I've been following it very closely for quite some time. When we look at, you're looking at land subsidence.
Yes.
And I know from what I understand or remember, some of the initial tests showed that the land actually came up. Have there been any studies to look at the effects when this is completed on the effects of ground, I guess, moving back up instead of subsiding? Because I think some of the initial, in the pilot, showed an actual reversal. Is that correct?
Yes. So one of our best data points was when the Franklin paper mill, I can't remember which year, 2008 timeframe, when they shut down, the USGS hadn't checked the extensometer, which is the device that measures the surface level. And when they went back and checked it, the actual rod that went down to the bedrock actually bent because the land rose so much. And we actually have that bent rod at the SWIFT Research Center. So you're correct, yeah. So that's one data point. Also, we actually have an extensometer right at the SWIFT Research Center. Anytime we're pumping water into the ground, you can see that extensometer, you can see the ground rise, but it's 0.001 feet. I mean, it's really small, but you can see a strong correlation between when we're pumping water in or we have to take water out. I think the most important point about that is we need more data. So the Commonwealth actually got funding to install another extensometer at West Point, and we have that at our facility at West Point. So we'll be able to, so I think we'll have 4 extensometers in Eastern Virginia. But from what the modeling shows, and we're trying to be very conservative, so every time we talk about it, it's either slow or stop land subsidence. Really careful not to say that the ground will rise because we simply don't have enough data to make that call. But you're right, that is that one data point that we do have is when that Franklin paper mill stopped taking water out of the ground did rise. Correct.
Great. We all learned a new word today. Extensometer.
Yes, sir.
Got it. Any other questions? Delegate Ware.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is, are there projects of this type, both in technology and process, that have been taking place someplace else? And if so, how long have they been underway? What has been seen?
So are you specifically about the treatment process?
The treatment process, the entirety of that process.
Yeah, so if you look at our treatment process, there's 5 different treatment trains that make up our SWIFT process. And what we call it is a multi-barrier. So like if the Floxed doesn't get it, then ozone gets it, or the biofiltration gets it. So any one of those treatment trains has been around for decades. The novel thing is how we've configured them in the sequence that we've sequenced them that makes the SWIFT process somewhat unique. But other than that, there's really nothing novel about the treatment process, the UV filtration, the GAC as filtration. There's nothing really novel about those treatment processes. Again, it's just how we've sequenced them. So we've pilot tested them. One of the reasons why we wanted to make sure it worked is that's why we built this 1MGD pilot research center to ensure that we were getting the quality of water that would meet drinking water quality. We do a number of different tests. So we have 100% confidence that this treatment train will work.
So in layman's terms, the SWIFT process, the sequencing, what's different about that as compared to previous work of this type?
Yeah, so maybe a water treatment plant may only have the first part, maybe Floxed, and maybe they'll have UV, but it's very expensive to have 5 of these treatment trains kind of lined up in a row like we have it. And that's one of the reasons why ours is somewhat unique, is because we have 5 of them. Some may only have 2 or 3 in line. But again, because we have so many, because we want to get our water to a very high quality, not just from a scientific perspective, but also from a public perception perspective. Because we want to make sure we're getting the pharmaceuticals out, we're getting the PFAS out. Like everything, that water is going to meet every drinking water quality standard before we pump that into the aquifer. And we also have a oversight committee, the PAROC, Potomac Aquifer Recharge Oversight Committee, that's made up of Virginia Tech, ODU, and VDH is on the board, Director Rolband's on the board. So there's also another separate third-party oversight committee that is looking at all the data, ensuring that everything looks good.
Okay, any other questions? Delegate Bulova and then Mr. Bayford.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Chair. I really appreciated this. I think it was, gosh, I want to say 10 years ago when HRPDC came and provided their first presentation on this, and it seems like it was a long way off, and it's amazing to see how much progress that you've come along. I had 2 quick questions. One deals with the land subsidence, right? Because I know part of the land subsidence is the groundwater withdrawal. The other part is land subsidence as a result of kind of the rebounding effect from the last glaciation. And so I'm curious what percentage is what? So are we taking care of a relatively small part of the subsidence, or is that a more major part?
That's a great question for USGS. I mean, it's something that why we're very careful in how we talk about land subsidence and say may and could, because even USGS is not sure exactly what is the impact. And that's why we're really careful to say we need more data, which is why it was really important that the Commonwealth sponsored that another extensometer to the north. Now we have 4. And so once these full-scale facilities come online, we'll have more data to calibrate the model to see well, is it true or not? Because right now, what the model is saying about land subsidence is that this could have a very significant impact. But again, that's only with two or three extensometers, depending on what the data range is. So more to come on that. More to come.
And Mr. Chairman, the second question,
Switching
switching gears, is I noticed that for each of the projects you had a cost, you had WQIF eligible. Can you speak a little bit to how much state money has actually been put into the program? So eligibility and actual grants being two different things. So how much have you relied on the state funds for this?
So in terms of grants, my understanding, we haven't received any WQIF yet for any of the ENRCP projects, but I have seen DEQ schedule on, I think April is when some of them should start to get approved. It's just a matter of time, but we have seen the dates and we have seen the schedule of when some of that WQIF should start flowing. We have received WQIF previously for other nutrient reduction projects, but specifically for this, it's coming soon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Dr. Bulva. Mr. Bayford, your first question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The 5 levels of treatment that you're working with, every media, regardless of what it is, eventually is completely exhausted. What is the potential toxicity issues with that, with this disposal of those medias as they exhaust?
So in terms of disposal, so that actually is a very important question, especially when you talk about PFAS. And the studies that we're doing around, well, what is the new regulation going to be? How long can this GAC, how long will it work before you have to change it out and have to regenerate it? And then there's a huge cost to that. So one of the things that we're researching right now is, well, what if we add another polishing step? Because the two technologies that can remove PFAS are GAC and ion exchange. And so we're testing ion exchange to from a business case perspective, will the GAC last a little bit longer if we use ion exchange as a polishing step? So once it's exhausted, we send it back to get it regenerated. So in terms of the toxicity and what happens there from a permitting perspective, I'm not sure, but we send it back to try to get regenerated.
As far as the ion exchange systems, is that acid-base rinse on those, or what is it?
So that's all new to me. I know that study is occurring. I have not seen that pilot project yet. That's all fairly new things.
That's a whole nother disposal of something that has to be.
Totally agree. And that's why, that's the beauty of the research center. We can do it at pilot scale, see if it works, build the business case, understand if it makes sense to move forward.
Right. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Any other questions? No other questions. So, members of the commission, my thought about this is, this problem of the discharge of the aquifer is not just a problem unique to Virginia Beach. It's unique to the entire tidewater plain in the Commonwealth. And from my point of view, the question is whether or not we should be expanding this idea beyond Virginia Beach and Hampton Roads, although there's obviously a lot of logistical and cost issues associated with that. And my thought was that we perhaps ask DEQ for some information on the feasibility of that and the potential cost of that for us to be looking at over the next maybe 12 months or something like that for not this session, but for next session. I'm just curious what the commission's thoughts were about that. Delegate Bulva.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I like the idea. I guess the question that I have is what other major utilities use groundwater as their source? So I know up in our area with Fairfax Water, that's all surface water. And so you don't want to take surface water and then pump that into the ground because you're leaving your surface water is high and dry. So I don't know if you can answer, or maybe Director Rolban can answer, whether there's other major utilities that use groundwater as their primary source. So I think that would be informative to know whether this could be replicated in those communities.
I know, just anecdotally, I know James City Service Authority is one, and I do know the large water utilities in Hampton Roads, they use groundwater as a backup, not as their primary delivery, but DEQ may know more.
Yeah. Mike, you want to take a shot at answering a question for us?
Chairman and fellow members of the commission. I can't give you a precise answer, but I've actually had discussions about this because of your call with Mark Widdowson. He's the chair of the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering at Virginia Tech, and he's also on the oversight committee for this. And he thinks there is actually more potential in several parts of Virginia. It would need a study. Obviously, number one, he's not as concerned about putting surface water in the groundwater. But, so that's an interesting discussion. But the other part of it is simply what's the geology like? You know, where would this work? And then also we need a significant population center that produces the sewage. So there's, and in some cases it might be better to use it for manufacturing or for drinking water. I mean, we almost drink it, you know, in the Occoquan, and we're taking sewage, we're treating it, putting it in the Occoquan Reservoir, and then we take it out of the reservoir and treat it at Fairfax Water. So there might be other alternative uses for the water as well. But this is a long-term, you know, a good thing to look at. And you know, they were very interested in obviously doing a study for DEQ. The issue would just be funding.
Mr. Rolban, you also would agree that just making sure that we avoid saltwater intrusion is a good hedge against the future. In climate change, we never know what's going to happen with our surface water and how much of it it's going to be. We just had a drought in D.C. where we had to tap our reservoirs for the first time in 15 years, and sooner or later we might be having to tap groundwater in certain areas to be able to supply large populations, right?
Correct. And that is a real concern. And the subsidence is also a huge issue. I mean, we naturally, by pumping the groundwater, we're creating basically we're reducing the pore pressure or decrease the pore pressure and consolidating these soft sediments. So there's also, you know, it's a twofold benefit.
Got it.
Well, threefold, sorry.
Got it. Anybody else have any questions or thoughts? Or Senator Mason.
Where you said you have 4 extensometers, Suffolk, West Point, Franklin, where's the 4th?
In Suffolk, West Point.
Newport News, the new plant?
Where is the 4th? 1, 2. West Point.
Doesn't matter.
I don't know.
Mr. Chairman, one more. How much, you said we have 3, we just went to 4. How much to set one up?
My understanding was the most recent one was about $1 million.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
That's a deep well. Okay. Any other questions or thoughts? Nobody? Okay. I was going to write up some proposed budget language about a study, but I never got around to it. So I'll probably just do it, and you all will see it eventually, and we'll see if it happens. But thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. It's interesting. Congrats on the success in the program. Okay, so next we have on the agenda Mike Rolban. So this was a request from Senator Peterson, our departing Ag Chairman, that we ought to look at all this money we spend in the Water Quality Improvement Fund every year, where it goes, whether it's being spent effectively, thoughtfully. And I think this presentation from Mr. Rolban is designed to be a teaser on a broader thing we could look into if we really want to dig into it. So I think that's the idea, right?
All I got was the agenda, so I'm responding to it.
Okay, got it. All right. Well, welcome again, Mr. Rolban. Let's hear about how we're spending our Water Quality Improvement Fund on things besides SWIFT.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. And Delegate Bulova, slide 6, I'll answer your question on. Okay. I have several staff with me. I won't take the time to introduce them, but Mike Crocker in particular from Clean Water Financing, so he will probably help me if I need help on answering any of your questions. We do have Brandon Bull, the head of legislative policy, you know. Alex Sams, our chief deputy. Sam Janetsky, that is our deputy to Brandon. And then for later for HABs, in case there's more detailed questions on that, Sandy Mueller and Drew Gary are here. Okay.
Great.
So first of all, this is the agenda that we asked to talk about. Give you a little bit of background, talk about what the status of the fund is now, what the current projects that we're funding, what potential future projects that we have, and what the program successes have been. And interrupt me at any time. For people that are new, it's driven by the 2000 Bay Agreement. The agreement required reductions that Jay was just talking about that are discharged to the bay, so primarily nitrogen and phosphorus. The WQF is one funding mechanism, and basically it's funding public wastewater treatment plants to upgrade it beyond current permit limits. But if they don't upgrade, the big catch there is that the nutrient caps that are in the Bay TMDL limit development in those areas. So this overall summarizes, we have 9 active agreements that are currently funded. The fund balance, we just got money into it, is $313 million. Our 2-year projected for these agreements is $170 million. So remaining balance, we have plenty of money for these 9 active agreements, 142. And these are the agreements that have been signed. And $170.4 million have been authorized, $28.3 million have been dispersed. I'll pause on that if there's any questions here.
There. Sorry. Everybody here can hear me, but everybody online can't. But Mr. Robin, what generally are these for? And I see they're very different sizes. I mean, one's 85 million, one's 29, and one's 2. So
basically nutrient enhancement, reducing nitrogen, phosphorus from wastewater.
Are these like permanent fixes, or are these like?
Yeah, these are like capital. I mean, they have operating costs associated with this as well. These are just for the capital.
Okay.
And of course, like if you notice, like Blue Plains, those are their contributions because a lot of Virginia, like portions of Virginia, send their sewage to Blue Plains in D.C. So this next one, though, is a list of all the future projects. These are ones that we already know about that are in the pipeline. And I think the one thing I wanted to point out, there's $445.3 million for 2 HRSD projects in the pipeline. So hopefully they'll go through, and that was to Delegate Bulova's question. So they're in the process. This, though, shows you a potential issue that'll be reported. So there's 10 potential agreements. We have $142 million left in the fund. Our 2-year cash flow for those agreements, at the bottom of that sheet, if you looked right here, we had 551, but 380 million that would be spent in the 2 years. So the fund balance would have a deficit of 238 million. So we'll need more money to cover that deficit if we approve them all. And what we are actually approving them with IOUs. So if you don't mind, I'll go to the next topic, which is the program successes. And this is just a summary of all the money that's gone through this program since its inception. So just over $1 billion now have been given, which is a fair amount of money. And the results, this is for nitrogen. Basically, we have an amazing reduction, basically almost 2/3 reduction already in nitrogen from these projects. So 8.2 million pounds of nitrogen that would have gone into the Chesapeake Bay are no longer because these grants were awarded. Phosphorus, similar, just different per scale, but 708,000. So we're a little over 1 million, so roughly 70% of the phosphorus load that came from these plants that we funded through this program no longer goes into the bay.
Mr. Rolban, so let me try and ask a couple questions to clarify things. So,
sure.
The Water Quality Improvement Fund, which is where sort of excess budget revenues go every year for those of us who don't get to serve on OPROPS or in the House or Finance in the Senate yet, those funds are purely dedicated to water quality improvement in the Chesapeake Bay, not other parts of the state?
Let me ask Mike Crocker. Yeah.
Until we meet our reduction.
Right. We haven't done that yet. But
until we meet our reduction required by the feds, right?
Right.
Okay. So then this second graph, your delivered loads, is that over a period of time or is that every year?
Well, that's the annual rate. Say on the far right is 2023, so just around 300,000 pounds of nitrogen. If you go to 2005, those same plants were a little over 1 million pounds.
Okay.
Yeah, that year, right.
Got it. Okay. Got it.
So
okay.
we are close, we're getting close to meeting our goals for nitrogen phosphorus. So there's a chance that, we'll hit the goal and then this money could help other places as well.
So, Mr. Robin, so this fund is solely focused on point source reductions at sewage plants, right?
That's the focus. There's other uses that could be approved, but we haven't typically done it because these demands are so high.
Got it. And this chart you have in front of us showing, what does it say, delivered loads? Is this, the green bars that are remaining that's continuing to be discharged, is that from point sources or does that include non-point sources?
Just from these point sources.
Okay. And is the zero where we're supposed to be or we need to get?
No, we have a total TMDL. So in phosphorus, we're expecting that we may have met the goal when the next Bay model update is in 2027. And nitrogen's close. So, you know, we might be there soon. I mean, we're allowed to put pollutants out. It's just we're looking at that total load from all the sources. So it may be that this sector is going to have to overperform because right now they're doing fantastic. I mean, they're overperforming already, but we have other sectors that are not.
Okay, when you talk about the goal we're trying to meet, is that a purely point source goal or also a non-point source goal?
It's a combination. So the Chesapeake Bay program through the WIPs have an overall TMDL, and the theoretical model that was developed for the Chesapeake Bay watershed model says if you meet these goal reductions, the bay should start on its own, be self-sustaining, and continue to improve. And that was our whole goal: sediment, nitrogen, phosphorus. We're already there on sediment, or really, it should be there with all the implementations happening, and we're getting closer.
Okay, and the idea is this was the low-hanging fruit, which is why we targeted this money at it.
I would say, I mean, I wasn't involved in that legislative decision, as you know, but and maybe Delegate Bullock would chime in, but I would say that this is the easiest one to be certain that you're getting results because we can measure at a pipe. Economically, it's not the cheapest. You know, some of the agricultural practices are cheaper. Typically an order of magnitude is from ag is the cheapest. Upgrades to sewer plants are the next 10 times more costly, and then 10 times more costly for stormwater.
Got it. Okay. Delegate Bullock, you have a question?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think to Director Rolban's point, the way the Chesapeake Bay Agreement works is that you're supposed to achieve reductions in each of your silos, and so that's wastewater, it's stormwater, it's agriculture, it's septic systems, and we're struggling in a couple of those buckets, and so even if we are nearing or have gotten to wastewater, you're going to need that overage in order to make it all balance out. I guess maybe a request and then a question for Director Rolban. Can you talk a little bit about the sources of funding for WQIF? Because it's a little complicated sometimes. And then can you also put that into the context of, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but I will, of, I guess, the governor's announcement today with respect to his budget priorities in the natural resources area? Because I think you were just mentioning that we come up short with respect to what we need for wastewater treatment from your presentation, but I didn't see any additional mention of wastewater treatment fund money in the governor's announcement. So can you help marry that up and shed some light on what the gap really is that we're dealing with going into the 2024 session?
So I'm going to disappoint you, Delegate Bullock, because I was in the Richmond sewers this morning and I changed. Okay, but and while I was changing, I guess that announcement came up, I learned about it like you learned about it from the press release. So I don't know anymore. But I will ask maybe Mike Crocker if you wanted to come up and help me for a second, because I'm not sure. I mean, in terms of the sources, I believe that it's in the budget every year. It's appropriated, and there's a line item. But other than that, I don't know exactly where it's coming from. Maybe you do. Sure.
So there are several ways. Mike Crocker, the regional team manager for the Clean Water Financing Group. There are several ways. So budget appropriations, either through general funds or bond authorizations. We do have penalties associated with WQIF grants, but they're very minimal. That's really the extent of it, other than a budget surplus where there's a mandated deposit. But it's important to remember that mandated deposit is split between DCR and DEQ. So we get 30% of the allocation that comes. That's pretty much it.
Okay.
Delegate Bowlby, you have another question?
Yeah, and so following up on that, so in terms of, I guess, the governor's announcement, if you can help out, again, I was a little surprised that wastewater is not mentioned as a budget category. Is that because those other sources have taken care of that need, or are we going into the 2024 session with a known gap in funding for wastewater treatment?
We will go in with the known gap. It's an annual exercise, and we rely on the General Assembly for those authorizations and appropriations. So if they're not made, the gap that Director Rolban is pointing out will be realized at some point.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And Delegate, we will, on the 20th, I'm told we'll know more about our budget. So there may be more information there.
Any other questions? So members of the commission, I think Senator Peterson's, you got a question, Delaware? Go ahead, okay.
I hit the request to speak.
Nothing shows up on my screen, so I don't know if it's working yet.
I've got a couple things. One is, as I look at both this program success chart and the one adjoining it, in the year 2011, there's a pretty significant improvement. Is there something you can identify that specifically led to that movement the right direction larger than many years?
Yeah, I'd ask Scott Morris about that. It was a particular project that went online. I don't recall the name of it. But these are based on the actual monitoring reports. And so it was due to a good project going online.
And the second thing is I look at on, I don't have a number, I guess it's the 8th slide. No, it's not necessarily the 8th slide. It's one
We'll
before
flip back.
that.
You turn it back on.
It's the slide 6. Down at the bottom, it's, and I don't understand all the acronyms, but it includes J.R. Swift and the J.R. ANRI. And I'm looking at the number on that, and I'm thinking back to the chairman's suggestion that he's going to put a budget amendment in, which I would probably agree with, because of the importance of preventing saltwater intrusion, subsidence, and the other upsides to this. But I'm looking at that, and it seems to me that that's going to be one of the challenges of something of that nature, is the magnitude of the cost. Is that?
That's totally correct. And Jay's here, he could answer maybe more cost questions, but it's not inexpensive. I mean, he's treating the water to drinking water standards, which is much better, than what we typically treat sewage to, and then the cost of ejecting it.
But I would say, just in following up, I agree with the chairman. The potential fruitfulness of this on several levels is certainly intriguing, but it certainly appears that we're talking about significant public financing.
I mean, you could save a little money if you put the water back in the drinking system, but not everyone's liking that idea.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Director.
Understood. So any other questions? Yes, members of the commission, Senator Peterson's idea of this was sort of whether these monies are being sort of prioritized, spent sort of the highest, best use, best purpose, smartly, et cetera. And that, I think, would probably require a lot more discussion and dialogue. I see Mr. Rolban wants to say something, I think. Yeah.
Senator Peterson mentioned to me last year, his concern was the fact that, and it was my concern when I first had to sign one of these agreements, Mr. Crocker probably remembers, we didn't have enough money, and that people tell me I have to sign a contract to pay them the money. And I'm used to being in the private sector. You don't spend money you don't have. And it's in there, there's a paragraph in the agreement, it tells the people that we may not have the money, and if we don't have the money, we'll pay you when we get it. But we're mandated by law to approve these grants, even if we don't have the money. And then we tell the General Assembly we need more money. But it was written, the way the law is written right now, there's no decision-making process. If someone meets the criteria, they apply for the money, they have to be eventually paid. And what Senator Peterson had mentioned to me is, should we maybe look at this and spend money where it's more cost-effective and not just give money to people that apply for it? It's a policy question.
Mr. Rolban, it seems to me, though, also that we're at least on your chart, and from what you said about achieving our objectives, we're kind of getting to the point, at some point, it sounds like in the next 5 years, 10 years, where there might be other things to spend money on too. Is that right?
Correct. But it was just the way it's written. I mean, it was intentional, what he explained to me, that to force the General Assembly to fund these projects. But it just seemed, I mean, it just scared the heck out of me the first time I had to sign an agreement when we don't have the money to pay.
But so it sounds to me like, at least from your initial reaction to this, or after having done the job for 2 years, there's that problem, which is the process issue and highest and best use and all that. But there's also, maybe we ought to start thinking about what the next stage 2 of this is as well, from a planning point of view.
A little of both. I was more concerned of, does it make sense to spend this money when there's other options that might be more cost effective to achieve the pollutant reduction?
Okay.
And
So does everybody on the commission think that's something we ought to look at perhaps for next year? Maybe get some input in the budget or something, study?
Mr. Chairman,
Delegate Hodges?
I do believe that. As basically, as you said, you take the largest projects first where you can get the low-hanging fruit. But over time, it's harder and harder and harder to have, further reductions with these smaller projects. And the costs are significant. And where can you spend that money elsewhere to have more of, a beneficial effect? And I think that's something we definitely should look at.
Okay. Anybody else have any thoughts? Delegate Bullock, you're reaching for your mic. No?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't object to looking into it. I'm curious whether we're actually running out of really good projects. I suspect we're going to have a lot of good projects still in the pipeline, and that's probably going to be for a while. But to the degree that we do look at it, again, I think it's worth, that eventuality where, you've got projects that might not be the most cost effective. I do think that we'll need to factor in the certainty aspect in there, right? And so, a pound of nitrogen that you are monitoring and know that you have gotten that reduction is different than a pound from other sources where you've got modeling or you've got, a study 20 years ago, that says
or 40.
you should be getting this amount. I think that certainty element needs to be factored in there. But, to the degree that eventually we'll be in a good position and say, hey, should this money be used in other areas, probably now is a good time to start planning for that.
Yeah. Got it.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, Senator
And
Mason.
I was just glancing at the governor's announcement today, and agriculture was at the top of the list. And, I've got the scar tissue, and I've been chopped up and spread about the fields trying to do something about the agriculture work. But that's one that we really need to look at, where we are, how far it's going to get us, what the cost, and are we going to hit the timeline? Because we've not, we've put a lot of money in the last couple of years to the ag programs, and it looks like the governor's suggesting to do so again. But boy, that's one that the timeline's running up against us, and we got a lot of work to do.
And you remember the Senate Finance Committee report that when Clive Crispin was at Senate Finance, he wrote on the cost effectiveness of different types of water treatment programs? It might be time to maybe start by just updating that study.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It sounds like we need to have some more dialogue.
Okay.
All right, and we'll try to. We have plenty to do next year, so good. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rolban. So, next, this item ties back into two things. One is the PFAS discussion we had, I think, at our last meeting, and then secondly, Mr. Curtis suggested that there's also a lead and copper rule that's out there that's going to cause us all some pain locally. And I thought that we might want to consider having somebody give us an estimate about what this is going to cost all of our localities so we can figure out how we're going to pay for it all, whether there needs to be help. And I thought we ought to talk about that some. So Dwayne Roadcap and Robert Edelman are here to provide us with some thoughts about that. You guys, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. I'm Dwayne Roadcap. I'm the director for the Office of Drinking Water, and I have Bob Edelman, who's our director of technical services for the Office of Drinking Water. To give you a little perspective on the drinking water program, it's a federally operated program, so Virginia enjoys primacy. We receive federal dollars, and in return for those federal dollars, we have to implement the federal rules for drinking water. So no matter which state that you go to, there's a minimum set of regulations federally implemented that you can expect for your drinking water. In Virginia, we have 2,860 public water systems, and they range from very small size, where you might be at a gas station or a restaurant in a rural county, to major population centers in Northern Virginia, Roanoke, Fairfax, Richmond, Newport News. And so we regulate a very wide range of public water systems in Virginia. We also receive about 110,000 water samples per year from those 2,860 public water systems. And so our staff do inspections of those water systems. We provide technical assistance. We have a funding program so that during our inspections, when we find problems for infrastructure or needs for the public water systems, we have funding that we can use to improve the water system's infrastructure. So with that as a backdrop, what we're going to do is sort of tag team a little bit about the federal rules that are coming our way or that we are anticipating. So PFAS is per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. There are about 5,000, 6,000 different chemicals in this chemical family, and they have negative impacts to health, or at least some of them do. And so the federal proposal is to regulate 6 of them, and Bob's going to talk about that. The types of health effects that the federal research has shown is that you can have some liver damage, some higher cholesterol, there's some cancers that are associated with these particular chemicals. And the chemicals are man-made. They've been here since the 50s. You'll see them in Teflon, nonstick coatings. Fire foam is a big contributor for PFAS. And pretty much everyone's going to have some level of PFAS in your blood, as well as the animals from this, because they're known as forever chemicals in the spirit of they're hard to break down in the environment. And so Bob's going to talk a little bit about the regulatory regime that EPA is proposing.
Sure. So back on March this year, EPA announced a proposed national primary drinking water regulations for six PFAS compounds, and I'll pronounce the names of those 6. It includes perfluorooctanoic acid, that's PFOA, perfluorooctane and sulfonic acid, that's PFOS, perfluorononic acid, that's PFNA, hexafluoropropylene oxide dimer acid, that's HFPADA, commonly known as Genex chemicals, perfluorohexane sulfonic acid, that's PFHXS, and perfluorobutane sulfonic acid, that's PFBS. The proposed national primary drinking water regulations don't require anything by water systems until it's finalized. So it's a draft right now. And so EPA does anticipate on finalizing the regulation early next year. So this regulation does a couple of things that are important. It establishes maximum contaminant levels for PFOA and PFOS of 4.0 parts per trillion. Those are very low levels.
Is that what's on your next slide?
Pardon?
Are we on to your next slide now? Oh, that was the Virginia Sampling Program. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry?
I want to make sure we're on the right slide.
You're on the correct slide.
Got it, okay.
Okay, and it introduces a new concept in the drinking water world of a hazard index. And that looks at the GenX, the PFBS, the PFNA, and the PFHXS, and combines those into one number, which we call a hazard index. So we have 6 analytes that are regulated by this proposed rule. Next slide. So in Virginia, we've been undertaking a sampling program to determine the extent of PFAS and drinking water in Virginia drinking water systems. And As over the last 3 years, 2021, 2022, and 2023, we've been doing some monitoring, and we compared those monitoring results against the EPA's proposed limits. Those are in the left-hand column in this table. And altogether, we took a look at 274 out of the 2,800 water systems that we have in the state. Those 274 water systems represent a population of about 5.8 million persons served. And what we found was it looks like our sampling indicates that there's at least 18 water systems that are potentially impacted by these contaminants. And those 18 water systems serve a population of 2.5 million people. Okay. And so those would be levels of concern. That's the total column on the right-hand side of the slide. We can go on to the next slide.
So for here, the EPA of those 2,860 public water systems, the EPA is planning to regulate what we call community water systems and non-transient, non-community systems. So an example of a non-transient, non-community would be like a school or a daycare or a small office building. And then for the other community systems, it would be what you would expect, a town, a city, a larger population year-round use. What you have here is where we've done our sampling with the Virginia Department of Health. This is not all PFAS sampling in Virginia, so we have public water systems that are doing their own sampling, and there's some other water quality sampling that's going on with some other organizations. But this represents what the sampling that we've done with the Virginia Department of Health with the funding and the resources that we have. Where you see those red dots or squares or triangles is where we're finding PFAS in the water that's at or above what EPA is proposing to regulate by early 2024.
So I'm looking, it looks like we get problems in Northern Virginia, the sort of Rappahannock River Corridor, Hampton Roads, Waynesboro, Roanoke, and then like Big Stone Gap or something, right? I mean,
correct. And the other thing to remember is I was saying that there's basically 1,578 systems that would be, there's 1,578 systems that would be potentially regulated. We've only looked at around 350 to 400 of them, or maybe a little less than that. Bob knows the exact number. So there's a large percentage of the potentially regulated community that we haven't looked at, but your observation is correct. Most of the hits that we're seeing are in Northern Virginia, Newport News, Roanoke.
All right. And so there's a question of, well, what's this going to cost? And so we're presenting some information that EPA has provided as backup to the proposed PFAS rule, and that's the source of this information. And taking a look at some of the wastewater, or the waterworks costs, if we had a public water system, in other words, it's publicly owned, and it has a surface water source, and it's large, in other words, serving between 100,000 and a million people. For all systems, EPA gave a range of about $500,000 to $0.7 million per year for 35 years for the lifetime of this rule. That would be the average or the range of the incremental costs. On the other hand, if one of those systems needed to either treat their source or change their source, then the incremental cost becomes closer to $2 million to $2.5 million, according to the EPA information that was provided in their economic analysis. And so you might ask, what's the consequence to the customers? And if you go to the bottom table in the slide and then look at the bottom row, for that same water system, because of the economy of scale, the additional cost per household would be $8 to $9 per year for their all systems model. But if the water system needed to change, it would be an additional $30 per year per household. And this table points out that there's an economy of scale thing going on. So for very small, privately held groundwater systems serving less than 100 people, those costs are much higher. And so, for example, to treat or change a source, the cost for over 35 years would be $677 per household. So very significant.
Good question. Good question. Oh, it was a question. Oh, Doug Ebola.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
So I just wanted to make sure I understood those numbers. Because at the last State Water Commission meeting, we had a presentation by Fairfax Water that gave some pretty big numbers, and I think we're focused mostly on capital. And so for the treat, change source option, and so I think Fairfax Water was looking at, you got to treat it unless you can stop it at the source. So that's $1.9 million per year for 35 years, and does that include both operations and capital?
That's intended to be the combined cost for complying with the rule. That includes sampling, capital costs, public notices, everything.
Okay, got it. But between 1.9 and $2.4 million per year for 35 years.
Right, and that's what the EPA's economic analysis suggested.
Thank you.
Just so we're clear, with the exception of, I think, Roanoke, where we've identified a source for at least one major source, for all these other areas with these hits, we don't really know where exactly who this came from or who to blame. It's just something that's built up over time, and we're not getting this money back from somebody else. This is a cost that everybody's going to have to bear as a society, right?
So as far as we know, the sampling that we've done doesn't identify particular sources.
Okay. So, there's more questions somewhere. Is it Mason or who else? Somebody else had one? Oh, Bulova, one more.
Yeah, so I guess following up on that, I'm making the wild assumption that the polluter ought to pay, and that it's probably less expensive in the long term to get rid of the source rather than having to deal with treating downstream. Do you have a sense of how much it would cost to do kind of that upstream forensic analysis in Virginia? So based on the fact that we got those hot spots, how much it would cost to go upstream to be able to pinpoint those sources?
I think that's a question for DEQ.
Well, so I'll add, so there's air deposition, there's industrial uses, and so it's really hard to identify the specific source. DEQ did some great work and figured out that there was an industrial source for the Roanoke Gen X, and the industrial source, there were two places. So the industrial source was releasing it. It was going to the wastewater treatment plant, and then the wastewater treatment plant was releasing it, and then it was getting into the water intake down about 5 miles downslope at Roanoke. And so if you go up to the Northern Virginia region, I would not be surprised to find that you've got sources coming from the wastewater treatment plants from the industrial uses, but you can't take out the possibility of air deposition as being part of it. And then, you've got biosolids and other things that potentially could play a role in the non-point source of that. So it's really hard.
Right. Thank you. Right. And Doug, well, my recollection from the presentation we got last time, at least with the Northern Virginia scenario, was that it was kind of like, what's that stuff that's in the Potomac River where we can't eat the fish yet? It's PCBs. It's kind of like PCBs. Nobody really knows where they're coming from, but they're all there and they're not going away. But the Roanoke one was when we were able to identify. I guess none of these others are small enough to be able to figure out, like Waynesboro or Big Stone Gap. I mean, those ones look pretty tight. Yeah.
Thank you. We did look at, an analysis of what SIC codes had a higher potential of generating PFAS, and EPA provided that information. And the problem is there's a lot of locations. So far it's just been a case by case, but we looked at that one hotspot, of course, that we found. We looked at Richmond Airport because it was Newport News had done some testing, and so we worked with them and the Army and the Defense Department to figure out where that's coming from. but it's a matter of funding. We do have fish surveys being done all across the Commonwealth, and so we're adding PFAS to those testing, so that may be picking it up. But when we talked about this last year, the issue was simply the magnitude of potential sources, and we were focusing on wastewater because that's what we regulate. And the thought was we could pick it up at a wastewater plant incoming, and then if we have a hotspot, look at the different industries of the SIC codes that are more likely to be generating it, and that would be where we'd look. The problem is it is ubiquitous. So if you look at, there's so many products we have that have gone to our landfills. It could be landfill leachates that would need to be tested as well. So it kind of added up, and you need multiple tests. And so we were talking, tens of millions of dollars just to find the places.
Delegate Bullivan, you had another question?
Yeah, and just to kind of wrap it up, because I believe, that if there are sources out there, it's better to kind of stop the bleeding.
Yes.
Especially before you're going to be putting in a lot of money towards, structures to take it out, and at least give our drinking water suppliers a fighting chance to stop those sources. That's probably going to be a combination of money and authority. I guess the other thing I wanted to point out, and I've always learned to take EPA-generated numbers with a little bit of a grain of salt from experience in other areas, because I do know, if you'll remember from our Fairfax Water presentation, that their estimate to install technology just for one of their plants was about $700 million. So just kind of put that into perspective.
Yeah, there's an order of magnitude difference in what they were saying. Fairfax Water is based on last presentation and then talking with Jamie Hedges afterwards, they are looking upstream to see where the sources are, because it's coming from someone in the Occoquan watershed or somewhere, and they've, based on the SIC codes, they have a suspicion, but it just takes time, and right now there's a several month delay still, right? And so once you take a sample, it could be 6 to 8 months before you get an answer. And so we need more lab capacity, and the state is increasing it. Virginia Tech, just at Hampton Roads at the Swift facility, I believe they're almost done, right? Okay. Yeah, so they're standing up a lab there. They're trying to get funding with Fairfax Water, the Occoquan Monitoring Lab. So as the lab capacity gets up there, we could hopefully do more, because one of the other problems, we could take all the samples, but there's no one to test them.
It's a good time to be a water detective. Senator Mason.
So the slide that we're looking at is the cost of the 6 that were identified currently. Is that correct?
Correct.
So I seem to remember from Mr. Pomeroy's presentation, there could be thousands of these that are not identified at this point?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Senator Mason, that's a great point. The theory behind this rule is that if you treat for these 6, you're going to grab treatment for the other thousands. So there is some thought in that particular area.
But I think Senator Mason's question was that there could be a lot more systems out there that those cost and numbers might not even apply, because there might be a lot of more smaller systems or some other systems that aren't contemplated in your numbers, right?
Right. Yeah. So, Mr. Chairman, that's correct. One of the key points, and it goes to what Delegate Bullivan was saying, is that these are EPA's numbers. These are not Virginia's numbers. We don't have a really good way of estimating what the cost impact will be to any specific water system. What we can say is that based on the limited sampling that we've done to date of those 1,578 that could be regulated under this rule, we've done a small sampling of how many, 270 some of those systems. And so once we get into routine sampling under the EPA rule, so under the EPA rule, the public water systems affected by this would have to do at least quarterly sampling or yearly sampling, depending on the system type. And so at that point, we're going to know exactly what kinds of costs people are going to be dealing with when that sampling starts happening.
And last one.
Senator Mason.
Quarterly sampling, but didn't we just say that they're just not people out there that can actually do the sampling and produce the test and the results at this point?
There is, the point was that we do need to increase and enhance lab capacity. And so one of the things that EPA says as part of its rule is that knowing that the rule is coming, that lab capacity will increase with time, and that the demand will be met with increased lab capacity. So when EPA announces its final rule, which they're anticipating by early 2024, Virginia would have 3 years from that date to implement the rule. And so the rule's been out there and being discussed for the last several months, and we are seeing more activity. So, for example, DCLS is now putting into place capacity to do PFAS sampling at the state lab.
Great. Okay, what do you got next?
So we were going to start, jump into the lead and copper rule, and I was going to let Bob talk about that.
Okay. Regarding lead, there's no safe level of lead exposure. And so we know that infants and children have health effects. They have decreased IQ and attention span. Children of women experience exposure during pregnancy, also have increased risk of health effects. In adults, health effects include heart disease, high blood pressure, impacts to kidney function and to the nervous system. So there are a number of consequences to lead exposure. In the drinking water world, the primary source of lead is from lead in lead pipes, which can present a risk to the health of children and adults, like I just said. And so we have two rules that are kind of going on at the same time. We have something called the lead and copper rule revisions, which that becomes the effective date, or the compliance date is October 16th, 2024. And on top of that, we have a draft lead and copper rule improvements, which was just published earlier this month. And so the improvements kind of tinker with the revisions. And so water systems currently need to work on and submit a service line inventory to the state, and that's going to be due in October next year. The requirement for submitting a lead service line replacement plan has been deferred by the lead and copper rule improvements until the compliance date of that rule. And the requirements for compiling and submitting lists of schools and doing school sampling has also been deferred to the compliance date of lead and copper rule improvements. But the lead and copper rule revisions does require some new public notifications and consumer notifications with new language and also much tighter deadlines, which will be a challenge for water systems. Under the lead and copper rule improvements, which is likely to be, or at least EPA says they would like to finalize this in October next year, which means that the compliance deadline would be 3 years from then. That would require water systems to identify all unknown service lines. And what that means is service lines with unknown materials. And, can we go back? And there would be a 10-year deadline to do that. So that 10-year time frame would start on the compliance deadline of the lead and copper rule improvements. The other big thing is it reduces the lead action level from 15 parts per billion to 10 parts per billion. And so this is going to have some significant costs for water systems. We can go on to the next slide now. And we should talk about the service line inventory. This is a significant requirement under both of those rules. The purpose of the service line inventory is basically to identify the locations of lead service lines and what we call galvanized requiring replacement service lines, which also potentially contain lead, so that when the time comes, the water systems can replace those and basically get the lead out. And so the slide we have here is one of the tools that we've provided to water systems to assist with classifying service lines. And one of the big problems water systems have is the records aren't very good or aren't complete as far as what the actual materials are, both on the utility-owned side of the service line and on the customer-owned side customer-owned side of the service line. And so we've provided this kind of guidance to water systems so they can help classify the newer service line as non-lead. So one of the issues that's really kind of a tough nut to crack is getting the customer-owned service lines replaced. And the reason that this is tough is because water systems don't own that. It's owned by the homeowner or the property owner, and so there's a right of access issue. And on top of that, the water systems, and many times, are not allowed to spend their funding to replace things that are owned by a private citizen or by a homeowner. And so there's a funding problem as well. Some states or municipalities have done some things that have been helpful to water systems that mandated the water system to gain access to the private service line, or funded the water system to replace the private service line, and that would be probably helpful in Virginia as well. We can go on to the next slide. So some incremental costs for the lead and copper rule improvements, and again, this is going to EPA and their cost estimate for the impact or the additional cost for water systems. And we can look at the large water system using surface water, and their costs for the next 35 years under this rule would likely be between $50,000 a year and $4 million a year, depending on what they need to do. And this probably doesn't include the how do I say this, the water systems that are above the 90th percentile that probably have to do a number of service line, or many service line replacements. And if you look at the bottom table, that shows the incremental cost per household. And for a public surface water system that's large, the cost per household per year seems to range between $0 and $15 per year. So it's very, very modest until, once again, we get into the replacement of many service line replacements, which I think is not covered in this table. And with that, I think we'll talk about funding.
Yes. So right now, the federal government is providing some additional funding to the states to help implement the rules. And in Virginia, of all the federal funding in FY22, you'll see that 1.63%. So this is the funding that Virginia is getting of all the federal funding dedicated toward this rule. And that 1.63% in FY22 comes out to about $88 million for Virginia. And so this funding ends in fiscal year 26, and that'll be the last year that the state would get additional funding beyond its base grant funding in 2026. So there's sort of a financial cliff. The Drinking Water State Revolving Fund, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law funding, the state has to provide a 20% state match for that supplemental funding. And the Commonwealth uses that to help water systems with infrastructure costs. The lead service lines doesn't come with any state match, nor does the emerging contaminants, which would be for PFAS. So those are the dollars that Virginia's getting. I say that they're estimated because EPA is still working on the lead service line numbers, and they may change, and I anticipate that they'll change upward for Virginia. The other thing to be aware of is that historically Virginia would get about 17.9 to 18.1 million in its base drinking water state revolving fund. The federal government has started instituting earmarks or congressionally directed funding, and this year, instead of getting the 17.9 to the 18.1 million, Virginia is getting 6.9 million. So that means in FY27, if the federal government doesn't change its ways, the funding that's been directed for this rule implementation for the next few years will go away, as well as some other funding that is being consumed from earmark spending. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I think we conclude.
Thank you. You know, my first thing, I want to know how it is you can make a get the lead out reference and not pull Led Zeppelin into your presentation. I mean, that's a softball. Come on. So y'all are basically saying that we're looking at a lot of money down the pipe being spent, private water systems, public water systems, and we're still trying to wrap our head around what it all is, but there's going to be some significant expense. It looks like $40 a year up to maybe hundreds of dollars a year, depending on your situation, right?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. So do you think we're in a position yet to try to get a better grasp on what the total scope of the problem is and the total expense is going to be like in the next, say, 12 months so that we can start to figure out if we need to develop a policy response to that?
From my perspective, Mr. Chairman, I think that's a good idea. A lot of our public water systems are having to do their own investigations at this point, trying to figure out how the impact will be to them.
Okay, but can you all see any benefit to the state sort of looking at these things on a global level as opposed to each system trying to figure it out, trying to figure out if we should have a state level response to it? Do you see any value to that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I would see value in that approach as well. One of the things that we can provide at a state level is a direct conduit to EPA and also provide some additional technical assistance and some security about the rulemaking and what we can do in Virginia to implement this in a way that will work for everyone.
Okay, and I assume figuring all that out would probably require some planning and resources and maybe a little budget help and direction from us. Yeah. Okay. Got it. Anybody else have any questions? Delegate Hodges. And then Mr. Bayford.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In looking at this, we understand the effects of lead and the health implications of lead, but the copper, though, it's really not the copper. It's coming from the solder, the flux, and the joint compounds is what we're looking at. So I guess it's just a perception standpoint from the public that we have a lead and copper rule revision. Is that something that people are going to be scared of copper and think that's a health issue, because really that's not the fact. So it's really the solder and the flux and so forth. Is there a way to tweak that? Because it's perception.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman and Delegate Hodges, it's an excellent point. What I'll say is that even with the rule change, optimal corrosion control has kept lead exposure very limited. And from your drinking water supply, you can expect about 30% of your lead exposure. So a lot of times when we're finding lead in children's blood levels, is coming from lead-based paint and paint chips inside the home or other sources that are not associated with the drinking water. And that's because in Virginia we do a great job with optimal corrosion control. That's not going to go away even with removing all the lead service lines if you were able to do that within 10 years, which is the rule expectation.
Right, and Mr. Chairman, I'm really not looking at the lead portion. I'm looking at the copper because it says lead and copper is not the culprit. It's the solder and the flux and so forth, but by using copper, it's just a public perception, thinking it's from the copper, and they don't understand the solder, the flux, and what's
yes,
used.
You're absolutely right, Delegate Hodges.
Okay, and then Mr. Blake Bayford.
Thank you, Chairman. You've mentioned several times about service line replacements. Has anybody investigated the potential sleeving of those? And I know with your corrosion control, you're using like polyphosphate type additives to coat those. Is that an option that would help instead of replacement?
So, Mr. Bayford, that's a good question. Under the EPA rule, it has to be removed. They are not allowing for any internal lining of the pipe.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. Thank you, gentlemen, for that presentation. Maybe you'll be hearing from us with some phone calls about some things we can stick in the budget for you, hopefully, knock on wood. So we have one final substantive matter on the agenda before we get to public comment and adjournment. and that is to hear from the Smith Mountain Lake Association about algae blooms, which apparently is something we're going to be hearing about this session, or at least those of you who are on ag will hear about, unlike myself and Senator Mason. Yeah. Ms. Green, are you presenting to us?
Yes, I am.
Great. Welcome to the Virginia Water Commission.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time and opportunity to introduce you to Smith Mountain Lake and the challenges we have faced this past summer. I'm Carrie Green. I'm the chair of the Lake Quality Council of the Smith Mountain Lake Association. I also serve on the board of the Roanoke Valley and Allegheny Regional Commission. I've been a full-time resident of the lake for about 2 years, property owner for 10. My public policy and natural resource management experience earned from running a science department of a regional planning agency in New Jersey has been critical in helping Smith Mountain Lake Association with technical initiatives and outreach. Smith Mountain Lake, for those of you who are not familiar, is the largest lake in Virginia. Excuse me, I said the bad word. The reservoir formed when American Electric Power Company dammed the Roanoke River at the Smith Mountain Gap. The lake reached full pond, and we consider 1966 the birthday of the lake. The lake is bordered by 3 counties, Franklin, Bedford, and Pittsylvania. It's home to over 22,000 full-time residents, hosts hundreds and thousands of visitors, family members, fishing enthusiasts, water sports, fun seekers every year. Hundreds of lake-centric businesses have evolved in the area since 1966, and the region is a booming retirement destination. We're a short 45-minute drive from I-81 and less than 3 hours from Richmond, so it's an easy day trip. American Electric Power, which operates the hydro dam, is a peak generator. A federal license governs AEP's management of the shoreline and their project. Fishing and boating at SML is considered some of the best anywhere. Significant populations of game fish draw tournaments, local and nationally ranked. World Championship wakeboarding competitors and water skiers all call Smith Mountain Lake their home. Communities around the lake are vibrant and active and continue to grow, with 20,000 plus acres of water and more than 500 miles of shoreline to explore. Spending a weekend, a week, or a lifetime at SML is unrivaled. Public boat ramps, state and county parks, plenty of open space, and swimming is available in all regions of the lake. And our 4th of July fireworks on the lake cannot be beat. The Smith Mountain Lake Association has been around since almost as long as the lake has been. Formed in 1969 by local business owners, our mission has evolved over the years. Keeping the lake clean and safe are our driving principles. We've monitored the lake water quality for 37 years through an amazing collaboration with Ferrum College. Over 50 volunteers are on the lake every 2 weeks collecting water samples at 84 locations. Ferrum College performs chemical and biological analyses on these samples, as well as collecting additional stream samples throughout the watershed. We track changing conditions on the lake for invasive species. We build and install fish habitats. We advise and educate residents on buffer landscaping to slow the flow of stormwater into the lake. And we monitor streams for critters who are intolerant to pollution as an early warning system. Our Water Safety Council guides boat safety checks, education on safe boating, and guidance for boat operators. Our board of directors and our volunteers operate only through membership and donations. Grants to fund our water quality monitoring program are passed through us from the power company and the water utilities. I know many of you are familiar with the term harmful algal bloom, or HAB, as it's kind of a misnomer. HABs are, while we say they're algal, it's actually a cyanobacteria that can, overpopulate and grow out of control and then, quote, bloom when stressed. These cyanobacteria can create and produce toxins. The summer of 2023 is not the first time that we've experienced harmful algal bloom conditions at Smith Mountain Lake. However, it is the first time that we've had swimming advisories placed over a large section of the lake. The cyanobacteria conditions were widespread and sustained this summer. Harmful algal bloom reports began coming into the VDH portal as early as May 22nd this year, a week before the Memorial Day holiday. Conditions were deteriorating at numerous locations in the Blackwater River, an arm of the lake, and elsewhere. And by June 1st, these alarming pictures had DEQ mobilizing to take samples at the lake. And I have to admit, the picture on the right is my backyard. It followed me from New Jersey. The little red dots on this map might be a little bit hard to see. There are 3. These are the sample points that DEQ visited on June 1st. Each sample collected on that day were found to contain unsafe levels of cyanobacteria, and low levels of toxins were also found. The Virginia Department of Health establishes swimming advisories if the concentration of cyanobacteria exceeds safe levels or toxin levels exceed safe levels. By June 6th, the time when the swimming advisory was implemented on the Blackwater Arm, almost half of Smith Mountain Lake was placed under swimming advisory. As the summer progressed, the concentration of cyanobacteria slowly came down, which is a natural progression through the season, and toxin levels mostly disappeared. A very few illness reports were filed with VDH that sufferers attributed to exposure at the lake. And luckily, we heard of no fish kills or ill pets this summer. Because there is limited funding for the DEQ to respond to inland water HAB reports, delays in the system lead to unknowns and potential exposure to harmful algal blooms. The DEQ collects samples and passes these off to the Virginia Department of Health staff, who overnight ship them to ODU for analysis. But the turnaround time on the results was unpredictable this summer. Initially, samples were also collected from the sites of citizen reports, which were generally coves or at docks. But as the summer progressed, the DEQ samples were collected from main channel areas as a follow-up. It wasn't until August 24th that the swimming advisory was completely lifted for the remainder of the Blackwater Arm. However, areas of the lake still showed evidence of cyanobacteria productivity. So in order for a swimming advisory to be lifted, if you're not familiar, the DEQ must return 2 times following the implementation of a swimming advisory, not less than 10 days apart, to collect those samples. And while we at the Smith Mountain Lake Association had excellent and open lines of communication with both DEQ and VDH, we weren't the only ones who ended up being frustrated by the situation. Impacts of the swimming advisory in the Blackwater Arm of the Smith Mountain Lake area were numerous. Economically, the Smith Mountain Lake Regional Chamber of Commerce reports that visitors to the Blackwater section of the lake were down 10% over the same time from last year. This decrease alternatively meant that other parts of the lake experienced overcrowding and more boat traffic. Concern for health and safety quickly morphed in the public into a distrust of the system, despite the Smith Mountain Lake Association creating a clearinghouse of all of the information we can gather. We even organized a town hall and invited both the DEQ and the VDH to speak. We had over 120 residents and citizens attend that town hall on July 6th, and I believe that it was quite successful. And don't forget, a swimming advisory does not mean the lake is closed. Rather, the VDH recommends against swimming due to the presence of cyanobacteria and or toxins. Now, lake scientists know that the causes of harmful algal blooms include excess nutrients, such as the ones we've been talking about today here, phosphorus and nitrogen, in the water and in the watershed. And introduction of sediment due to erosion, siltation, and wave action introduces even more phosphorus into the water. And our warming waters, more intense rainstorms, and warmer temperatures all contribute to that perfect soup recipe. So what is happening at Smith Mountain Lake? Why this year? Why did we have sustained, long-term, and impressive harmful algal blooms? Why did it last so long, and will it come back? And honestly, we don't have decent answers to any of those questions yet. And the only way to figure it out, truly, is to conduct a significant study of the watershed, its dynamics, and contributing factors. In 2024, the Smith Mountain Lake Association is gearing up for a full-court press to be ready for the harmful algal bloom season, which could start as early as Mother's Day. Our HAB working group, which is established, which includes numerous members of the public, elected officials, safety officials, and members of the Smith Mountain Lake Association, has begun developing an education and communication campaign called Be HAB Aware. We will be developing at the Lake Association a monitoring program for harmful algal blooms at docks this year. We will be working with and training volunteers in microscopy and identification of HAB species in conjunction with the work that's done at the NOAA Phytoplankton Monitoring Network. Specifically for the Blackwater Arm, we are going to work very closely with Ferrum College to dig into their 37 years of data. We're going to ask them to analyze anomalies in that data and to ground truth historic land use change that may have affected what's coming in from the watershed. We plan to engage with a lake management firm to conduct desktop analyses of the nutrient loading in the watersheds of the Blackwater Arm. But it wasn't just the Blackwater Arm that was experienced harmful algal bloom conditions this year. Unfortunately, DEQ wasn't able to reach many of the citizen reports, or when they were able to come out to the citizen reports on other parts of the lake, conditions weren't sufficient that they could collect samples. And it seems that there were HAB-related conditions on other parts of the lake as well. It's our contention that the entire Smith Mountain Lake watershed must be assessed. So we are here today to respectfully request that funding be allocated in the governor's budget to fund a full watershed assessment for Smith Mountain Lake. The funding we are requesting today is reasonable to get us started on this work. We've developed a comprehensive work plan to characterize the sub-watersheds and develop a game plan going forward. We understand that Virginia Tech has been identified as an appropriate research partner to undertake an assessment of the lake, the watershed, sources of nutrients, and they can provide recommendations on reducing and preventing further harmful algal blooms. The background and rationale are already established to support this work. Identification of a team of experts to implement this work plan is effectively complete. But without the hard data, smoking guns, and real-time results, Smith Mountain Lake, its residents, visitors, business owners, and the Commonwealth will only be crossing fingers that the situation improves. I figured I'd keep it quick. I know you guys have been sitting here for quite a while, but I thank you very much for your time today. Smith Mountain Lake Association and I are grateful for this opportunity to have met a number of you today before the meeting, and I appreciate that time as well. I'm happy to answer any questions that, Mr. Chairman, that you have or any of the commissioners have at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Green. I was just curious, is there any, in having swam in Smith Mountain Lake most of my childhood, I appreciate your level of concern, and it's amazing what that lake has become. Are you aware of whether there's any connection between the root causes of algal blooms and the production of moonshine? Just kidding. So,
well, that's water being withdrawn. Isn't that a sterilizer?
Any idea what this is going to cost?
You know, it depends, because you could be looking at a significant amount of money like is being spent at Lake Anna for a 2-year study. That kind of money would work at Smith Mountain Lake.
How much is that?
I believe they're looking at $4.5 million that's already been allocated for the study at Lake Anna.
All right.
For Smith Mountain Lake, we can get started with desktop analyses and data reviews and stormwater inventories for $150,000.
Okay, I'm kind of just looking at a map right here, and it looks like I'm familiar with the upstream part of the Roanoke River towards Roanoke up that way, but not in the Blackwater so much. It looks to me like most of the watershed is sort of up towards Rocky Mountain, Burnt Chimney, and I'm surprised at how much open land there is, and so as opposed to forests. So I suspect one of the likely culprits might be, livestock, animal farming, that kind of thing.
We would agree with you, and that is one of the tasks that we're going to set Ferrum College to this year is a GIS analysis of a historic land use change to start to gauge the loss of forest and the conversion to farmland.
Got it. Does anybody else have any questions? No? No? Well, listen, we all appreciate the need. You got at least, are you on probes? No. We got at least 2 appropriators on here, and we will convey your message and the need, and I certainly have a personal connection with that place.
Come out and visit us.
I have. I've actually, my grandfather chased the elusive striped bass out there for decades, and then I paid a guy with a boat and some fish finders to find him for me once. It was a lot easier. But
next generation.
There's a lot out there. And Delegate Hodges, so I checked while we were sitting here, we don't have any blue catfish.
Good.
So that is a good thing. I have copies of our work plan. If anybody would be interested, could I provide them?
Sure.
Thank you.
We appreciate that. And thank you for sitting through all the other presentations and taking the time to put that together for us today.
Thanks so much.
We'll convey it to to everybody. So I think that's it on the agenda except for public comment. Is there anybody here to make public comment for us who's sat here for 2 hours and 12 minutes? Nobody else? Okay. Well, with that, we have a few things to talk about off session. I think we'll be back in the spring. And is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Thanks for coming out on a Friday afternoon, everybody. We all appreciate it. Talk about water.